Big, most people call me ML for short. I'm the executive director of I-10, and in case you don't know who I-10 is, we are a nonprofit organization. We're in our 10th year, and we are a catalyst for tech innovation. And what we mean by that is we help tech entrepreneurs identify business opportunities and validate proof of concept, build product, and launch their product and get into the marketplace. We have programs and services that we provide to entrepreneurs that are free of charge. So a wonderful resource for the entrepreneur and innovation community in St. Louis. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit differently because most of the time when we're here, we're doing programming, it's really focused on entrepreneurs' needs and giving them the resources and tools they need to help stand up their businesses. But another important thing that I-10 does is really engage with the community. So entrepreneurs first, but in doing that, that also means we want to work well within the community and with our partners in the community that also provide services to entrepreneurs, and make sure that we're working well together to have the greatest impact overall. So tonight I'm very excited to have 3 of our community partners join us and talk about 3 of the community initiatives we've been working on in the past year. Some just in the past year, and Inclusion Symposium, we've been partnering with Cheryl and BioSTL for the last 4 years on that event. So this is fun for me because I don't really prepare anything. I get to do all the talking.
In case you didn't.
So at this point, I'm going to introduce you to my buddies over here and let each of them tell you about the initiative or program that we've been working on together, kind of, what it is, where it is, what we've learned from it, and kind of where it's going in the future. And then we're going to invite you guys to ask them questions. So, I don't know if you heard earlier, but Jim said he's not taking any difficult questions tonight. So, just to set the stage right here, okay? I want to manage your expectations. So, no difficult questions for Jim. Give them all to Ben.
Right.
Okay, so with that, I would like to introduce you. On my left, you're right. I'm left-handed, so I always have to double the person. So, is Jim Vonderheit. Jim is a principal at Morrison Capital, and he also is the vice chair on the board of I-10. So Jim is going to talk tonight about the workforce tech talent study. In the middle is Dr. Cheryl Watkins-Moore. She's the director of bioscience and entrepreneur inclusion at BioSTL. We have worked together on the Vision Inclusion Symposium for the last 4 years. And at the very end is Ben Johnson, also of BioSTL. He's the vice president of programming, and we collaborated with him on the Data Collective, which, it's like, what is that, right? But it's an effort to, we have, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but our annual report happens to be in the back of the room, and many of the resource organizations produce their own annual impact reports, and we have been working to try to figure out how we can produce one comprehensive impact report for the region so we can get a really true understanding of what's happening in the St. Louis region. So with that, Jim, I'll let you start if you would like to share.
How many hours do I have?
I think 3.
Okay.
Just beware of time, please. You can do whatever you want.
So, my name is Jim Vonderheit, and I've been involved with I-10 for about 10 years. And one of the things that is amazing about our tech community is that we talk a lot about the need for emerging technology and technologists. And the tech talent, I mean, we thought, well, we should know what the real needs are around the community. Well, we got into thinking about this and talking about it and studying it. We realized that while a lot of work has been done benchmarking the current needs, nobody had ever done a study forecasting the needs at the role level, down to the developer, AI, the programmer, and architect, that would forecast for us and identify where the growth could occur. With the purpose of, the underlying purpose for I-10, of course, is you cannot have a robust tech startup community without a lot of talented tech people. And in fact, you can't have a robust economic development program in any region of the country now without a robust technology platform and a stream of people coming into it. So how do we go about this? Well, we looked to see if anybody had done a study like this. We discovered that it hadn't been done. And so we decided and we designed a study, and we were fortunate enough to have 3 different groups help us with funding for this study. We thank them that Avis and Young, Gateway to Innovation, and TDK Technologies underwrote this study for us. We had it professionally designed. And the first thing we said was, well, let's go off and do a quick study of all of the skill sets and the needs among hiring managers, tech hiring managers across the region. Well, that should be easy enough to do. And the problem is, the problem we came across was, nobody knows who they are. So in the whole region, nobody really knows who the tech hiring, so we had to go to and compile from 5 different sources, a list of technology hiring managers across St. Louis City, County, and St. Charles County to see who they were. We sent them a survey, 3,500 surveys, 315 came back, and we learned some very, very interesting things. We asked them what their current needs are and what your future needs are. And a summary of this study is back on the back deck, so I'm not going to take you through the details, but there are a couple of key points. We found that there's going to be a 60% increase in demand over the next 3 to 5 years across almost every role that you can identify as a tech talent role. Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that as a community, we have an opportunity to train. And we often criticize ourselves as a community as not being very well resourced. I mean, after all, Amazon's going to New York, right? So anyway, where's all this going? Where's it going? Well, what's really happening is we are adequately training and satisfying the demand that exists today. We asked hiring managers, how does St. Louis compare to other places where you're looking for tech talent? And we were pleased, I was pleased to find that actually we are average, sort of like Lake Wobegon, right? We're average, but it's really good to know that St. Louis is no better and no worse as a resource environment for hiring tech talent. But what that means to us at I-10 is that if we could possibly create a coordinated community-wide conversation about what do we do to train people and how can we attract them and how can we give them encouragement that if they make an investment in developing a skill as a programmer or as an analyst or as an architect in technology, that the roles will actually be here. And so now for the first time our community has a roadmap that says over the next 3 to 5 years, if you're interested in developing those skills, there'll be jobs for you. A couple of other trivial points that I think are just fun as we thought about this study. One of the groups that we got involved with this to survey was USGIF, which is the public-facing development resource for the NGA. And so we surveyed their 70 or so partner companies, member companies. And they were part of this larger survey group of 3,000, so I don't really know exactly how many of them we heard from. But one piece of trivia we found out that has always surprised people when I've told them, and that is that 12% of the roles in the next 3 to 5 years in this region will require a top secret clearance. So we know that it takes a long time for people to get those skills. It takes a long time to get qualified in that way. So our goal now is to start the conversation exactly like forums like this and saying, the better we are at creating a coordinated effort at training technology talent, identifying specific roles and helping people to get excited about filling those roles, the more robust our community will be and the stronger our total economic development package will be. That's my story.
Cheryl, that leaves you 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah. So,
jump
off your throne, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sitting here swinging my legs here like I'm 8 years old. They need to make stools for women. That's a need. Hello, everyone. My name again is Dr. Cheryl Watkins Moore. My role here in the region with BioSCL is leading our inclusion initiative, which is about 4 years old now. And just to back up and level set for folks, our inclusion initiative is focused on women, people of color and immigrant populations to support them as they attempt to build successful STEM businesses right here in our region. So what does that mean? We have 3 strategic initiatives that support this initiative. One is creating awareness around what are the opportunities in STEM, what are those types of businesses, because people traditionally think, oh, it's pharma, medical device. No, STEM is so broad, it crosses so many industries, from tech to food. I mean, if you're doing formulations, if you're doing beauty formulations, our traditional focus in BioSTL is life science, but life science now crosses so many industries. So what we try to do is have people understand what are those industries, and you don't need to be a scientist or a chemist in order to start companies or work in these startups. If you've got a great skill in finance or in accounting or regulatory background, you can either start your own company to service many of these tech companies that are started by the tech experts, or you can work in a startup, or even now we need mentors for those folks who are starting those companies to help those individuals start those companies. So that's our first tenet, is increasing awareness. Second is, you guys, there are smart people out here starting these companies, and a lot of them are transitioning from corporate roles or from other roles. But being in a corporate situation is very different from raising money. Take it from me, I've been on both sides. So we partnered with CET, which is our training arm. They have a fabulous Square One program that's a 10-week business boot camp with vetted mentors that help you realize one of 4 things as you build your business plan. If it's a great business plan, they're going to help you persevere to build it. If it's something where you need to pivot, these vetted mentors are going to help you do that. If it's a really bad plan, we want to kill it and kill it early. Because what we don't want people to do is spin around in our ecosystem trying to get resources, getting frustrated, and leaving. So what we tell people is, if it's a bad plan, we're not killing you. Come back with a new one. We want to help you build a business. And then lastly, what we found is people that go into this Square One program, where their plan might have been killed, they usually find partners. And they have gone on to create new companies with partners that they found in that program. So the third piece of our tenet is connecting the resources as well. As everyone knows, I don't know if you do know this, but St. Louis has been acknowledged as one of the top 3 or top 5 cities for startups in this country. And it's not just because of the entrepreneurs that we have here, it's because of these great entrepreneur resource organizations that are here to support entrepreneurs. So that's my role, is to help knit these organizations together, knit the resources together. I-10, we've been working together for, it seems like centuries, dog years at some time. But we work together to be able to support entrepreneurs. So those are our 3 tenets. They still are our tenets today. Our programming, Vision is our annual event, but it's not the only program that we offer. We have several awareness type of programs that we do. Entrepreneurially Thinking is a podcast that I produce with my co-host, Christy Maxfield from CET. It's a weekly podcast. If you haven't heard, tune into it. We've interviewed or had guests on from the CIO of Monsanto talking about what they're doing innovatively at Monsanto, all the way to a 9-year-old kid who saw the value of vending machines and begged his mother to get vending machines and put them in institutions. Now this kid has had his college paid for, okay, basically. Nice. So that's one tenet of our programming. CET is a training arm, as well as some other programs that once you finish CET, we can help you move your business along that way with our Biofundamentals program. And then again, the knitting of resources falls under this Equity and Entrepreneurship Collective, which I think you're going to probably talk about. You will, okay?
I will.
You will.
I will.
So Vision is actually an event that 4 years ago was a vision of mine. And it was one night I woke up, I said, you know what? We've got all these great conferences here in St. Louis that are dedicated to entrepreneurs, but nothing specifically to the target group that we support. So we started Vision 4 years ago. We started it on Harris Stowe's campus. We brought in speakers from all over the ecosystem to talk about how they're building businesses, to talk about subject matter, topics like marketing, finance, all different types of things. And the whole focus of Vision is really to educate, support, and celebrate entrepreneurs of color, women, and immigrant populations. And I don't want you guys here tuning out, especially all of my Caucasian brothers in here, because inclusion does not mean exclusion. We firmly believe that we need everybody at the table and we need you guys at the table. The whole focus is that we need to have everyone at this table, because when one vote rises, all of us rise if we're all focusing on innovation and having a diverse population to do that. So the first year, like I said, we hosted it at Harris Stowe. We had about 250 people come out to this event, which we didn't know what was going to happen. It is a collaborative effort. I-10 is on the planning team, as well as some of the other resource organizations that are in our region. We come together to put this event on, and the whole focus is how can we support these entrepreneurs in the region? What topics do we need to cover? What are the type of speakers that we need to bring in? And we look for not the speakers that are the ones, you know, that are speaking all over St. Louis. We're looking for people who are building businesses, who are in the trenches, who can tell a story to these same folks who are trying to do the same thing. We also bring a keynote from out of town to come in to speak to this audience. The first year we had Jonathan Holyfield. This guy was amazing. He was noted by Obama as an architect of inclusive competitiveness. He came here and spoke, and he just blew the roof off of the event. Last year we had Lonnie Johnson. Do y'all know who Lonnie Johnson is?
That's the university engineer that came up with the water.
Y'all know the Super Soaker water gun?
Super Soaker.
That's who he is. This guy is a NASA-trained engineer. He worked on the Galileo and Sistine projects. But most people don't know that. They know him as the Super Soaker guy. Yeah.
That's great.
This dude is heavy, okay? He also has over like 80 to 90 patents that he has produced. And that Super Soaker last year when he came, he said just passed $2 billion in sales.
Oh my God.
Yes. So that little water gun, that little water gun brought that much in sales. And he also, I think, because Hasbro infringed on some of his patents,
he did it right.
he also got another 60 million or 100 million from Hasbro. So he ain't hurting, okay? He came here to St. Louis and he was our keynote last year. This year we brought Arlen Hamilton to town. Do you guys know who Arlen Hamilton is? Were you there? If you were there. Arlen, okay, so how many people know who Arlen Hamilton is? If you don't know, raise your hand. Arlen Hamilton is an African-American woman who is breaking, I think, all types of barriers. She is an African-American woman who is developing, has a venture capital firm called Backstage Capital. And her focus is investing in women, I should say black female founders, folks from the LGBT community, and I think women overall. She has a fund she just raised, she's raising, it's a $36 million fund specifically for black women starting companies. And she's looking to take that $36 million and invest $1 million each into companies, so 36 companies. She already has a portfolio of, she thought she was going to make her 100th investment in 2020. She's ahead of schedule. She just made her 100th investment in a company this past spring. She was featured on the cover of Fast Company magazine in October. And they call her a venture catalyst because she is changing things. She got into this basically because she said, I was looking at the stats of how many dollars, how much was being invested in women-owned businesses, especially black women businesses from the venture capital space. 2% goes to women overall. Can you guess how much goes to black women? 0.02%. He's sorry, 0.002% goes to black women businesses. And that's what, she was starting a company, a different company, and she was like, you know what, I think should be my focus. She was here in St. Louis. She just announced accelerators that she's putting in. She's putting 4 accelerators in 4 different cities. We were trying to get her to come here, but I do have on stage her saying she's going to consider St. Louis as a 5th city, but she has.
That's because you wouldn't let her off the stage.
Absolutely, absolutely. But Detroit, Philadelphia, LA, and England, the UK. She's starting accelerator programs here. First black female-focused that heads an accelerator program. So Vision this year, our focus was not just on emerging entrepreneurs. It was focused on people who are already existing business owners as well. We broadened the platform. And we had over 300 registrants for that day. And it was focused on contracting. How do you get access to large contracts? We brought in speakers that were versed in the certification process, as well as folks from corporate and other settings that are part of procurement. So we left that day. The afternoon was roundtable discussions. People had an opportunity, instead of just panel discussions, we put people in rooms where folks can have a one-on-one opportunity in a roundtable type of discussion to talk to these entrepreneurs, business owners, speakers in a setting where it's not just somebody talking at you, it's a dialogue. We got back great feedback from this year's event. We hosted at different places every year. This year was up on UMSL's campus. Last year was at Flow Valley, and the whole focus is we had it in Cortex for the first 2 years, and we felt, you know what, we need to be in community. So and we have been welcomed on these college campuses. Actually, these faculty are bringing their students to Vision. So we welcome you guys next year. It was a wonderful event. Talk to me afterwards if you'd like to know more about it, but I'm going to stop talking now. Done.
Good evening, everyone. Ben Johnson from BioSTL, as mentioned. Primarily here to represent and talk about the St. Louis Data Collective, but since Cheryl told me I had to, I'm going to do what Cheryl tells me, and it's on the slide. I'll start with sort of a genesis story for us related to the Data Collective, and it really is an extension of the story Cheryl just told. The St. Louis Equity and Entrepreneurship Collective. So Cheryl described her work engaging entrepreneurs, working with partners in the community to develop a pipeline of support for diverse entrepreneurs in St. Louis. And I mentioned 4 years, we've had 900 participants and 90 business concepts really kind of come out of that. 9 companies really take off, raising almost $40 million in capital and starting to really generate impact in the region.
And 10 national mentions.
And 10 national mentions about St. Louis as a best practice community, really focused on integrating diversity and inclusion into the ecosystem. And yet what we realized is while we were doing some of that work, and I-10 has programs, and CIC and others, lots of programs and real intentional commitment to this, it wasn't exactly clear how those fit together, right? What does diversity as a need of who is in the room? How do we understand beyond that to inclusion? How do who in the room really feel they can be their authentic self in the room? And even beyond that, what does that really look like in equity in entrepreneurship? How do we understand that the outcomes of entrepreneurship become unpredictable based on who the entrepreneur is? And so BioSTL, led by a former colleague of ours, Natalie Self, who many of you knew and worked with, really conceptualized the St. Louis Equity Entrepreneurship Collective on behalf of 13 entrepreneur support partners to secure money from the Kauffman Foundation, really to be a first-of-its-kind regional effort in the U.S. to apply that racial equity lens at an ecosystem, systems-level, collective impact change. And candidly, we have no idea what that meant or looked like. We just knew that there had to be an additional level of conversation in St. Louis about how we really create a viable entrepreneur ecosystem. And so the Equity Collective was born. One of the threads of that work along conversations around how do we help entrepreneurs navigate, how do we understand racial equity, racial bias in entrepreneurship, how do we understand capital flowing to entrepreneurship. Another thread of that was around data. And it came from a simple question, actually, during the application process with Kauffman. Natalie and I were on the phone with Kauffman in the application process, and they said, how many black entrepreneurs are in St. Louis? We looked at each other, and we were like, we can't answer that question. Right? We can tell you how many are in our programs, and ML can tell you how many in her programs. We can tell you maybe how many come to Venture Cafe. But collectively in the region, we couldn't tell you that, right? So we didn't know, we don't know, sort of a baseline. Where are we starting from? How diverse and inclusive and working toward equitable are we? And so one of the threads and tenets of the Kauffman work became answering that question. Like, how can we understand where we need to go or how far we've gone without understanding where we are? And so maybe begrudgingly, maybe willingly, ML raised her hand, and I-10, on behalf of the region, led an effort to do that census. And what we came to quickly understand is that in order to answer those questions as related to a diversity, inclusion, equity conversation, you need to answer those questions for the entire St. Louis entrepreneurship ecosystem. I was reflecting last night at the Startup Connection event, many of you were probably there, talking with an attorney in the community. I came to St. Louis 15 years ago thinking I'd be here 9 months and kind of stumbled into this work, and early on one of my first tasks was go to this meeting around this thing called the Capital Alliance. And 6 of us sat around the table, folks who were writing venture checks and some attorneys, and we worked on something called the St. Louis Capital Alliance Venture Capital Report. And we literally, among the 6 of us, went, these were the venture deals in St. Louis, and they added up to this much money, right? Because that was what was going on. But since then, so much activity has grown in the community, we really don't know the extent of what has happened. We don't know the impact that entrepreneurship is truly having in the region. And so ML took on that project, not just of counting how many black entrepreneurs are in the region or other diverse entrepreneurs, but really what's the census of what's happening in St. Louis. And so I-10 led an effort on behalf of a number of entrepreneur support partners, subcontracted with a group called SourceLink out of Kansas City, who has done this kind of work in Kansas City and regions around the country, to do a comprehensive data collection process. How do we take the data that BioSTL has, and the data that I-10 has, and the data that T-Rex and Arch Grants have? How do we put it all into one place? How do we dedupe it so we know that Jane Doe, who has worked with all 4 of our organizations, is counted 4 times in our regional count? And so we worked on deduping that. What we found is that is an incredibly challenging process, right? One, it's challenging enough for any individual organization to keep track of their entrepreneurs, to do surveys, to collect outcomes, outputs, activities. It's really hard when you start to try to do it. And it's a really trust-building exercise, right? You've got to be trust with the entrepreneur that we've worked with you and you're going to tell us what your revenue is, but trust that we're not going to just broadcast that to the world, right? Or that we're not going to share it with someone else. It's trust between partners, right? That we're not going to poach each other's entrepreneurs or whatever the case might be. And so I think we made incredible strides this year. Earlier today had this memorized and I should have actually just brought it. We got in the count of, I think we ended up getting 189-ish individual entrepreneurs or businesses that we counted. We know that's not the whole universe. That was from among 17 organizations who contributed data in some way. We know there are many more entrepreneur support organizations in the region, but we're trying to build steps. I think one of the most shocking or most interesting findings, many assume that we would find lots of duplication. We'd find a lot of those. Jane Doe has been to all 4 of us. We found there's actually very little of that in the entrepreneur support community, which I think is representative of, one, we probably didn't turn over all the stones and we don't have all the data. But maybe even more so, we have an incredible breadth of entrepreneurs in the community who are finding places to work with, people to help them. They have different ideas, different business models, different business industries. And so there really isn't as much duplication in our entrepreneurship ecosystem, which for me is exciting because that probably means there's more impact and more opportunity. There aren't 85 of the same company going to the same different places. They're entrepreneurs with a variety of ideas doing different things. And we found that these companies are really having impact. Our count, I think, said that in the last year there's upwards of $450 million raised from these companies. There's been other studies that cite different but similar ballparks. I think our jobs numbers were upward of 1,000 just among these small companies. And so in the time from the St. Louis Capital Alliance when we could count on 6 fingers the number of venture deals that were done and count on the number of jobs in the entrepreneur support community, we now see physical manifestations of that in Cortex and T-Rex, but we could also start to count that, the economic impact of that in jobs. And we learned that this is just the beginning, that in order to really understand the impact of entrepreneurship in the community, and importantly to really understand the paths to best support entrepreneurs, to put entrepreneur at the center, and as entrepreneur support organizations really empower them, we got to continue sharpening our pencils and sharpening this process. And so ML and her team really laid out a process to do this again next year and be better at it. Do it again the following year and be better at it. Get customer feedback. The same process that we reach to entrepreneurs and get customer feedback and iterate, pilot, and beta test, all of those buzzwords. And we're doing that really in the Data Collective, understanding the impact of entrepreneurship in the region. I'll stop there. Happy to answer any more questions about the Data Collective, about the Equity and Entrepreneurship Collective, about BioSTL. Cheryl described in depth one area of our work. Many of you know we have many other efforts, our entrepreneur support investment arm, BioGenerator, public policy work, talent, workforce, STEM STL, regional STEM initiative. Happy to talk about any of those, but look forward to some dialogue. You've heard enough from us. Let's have a conversation. So, thank you.
Thank you all. When we look at the St. Louis ecosystem, some of you may be familiar with the ecosystem map that we produce on entrepreneur resource and support organizations. When we started creating that map, there were just like 20 nodes on that map. Today there are like 74. And when we published the map, within a week, we already identified 2 other organizations that should be included on the next version of that map. That map, if you haven't seen it, we have some of our annual reports in the back of the room. It's on there, but it's also downloadable from our website. But it's an incredible resource as far as, it looks like a big spider web. Telling you that if you're an entrepreneur and you need help with funding, where to go, if you need office space, where to go, if you need program and resource services, where to go. So the beautiful thing is that that map is growing and continues to grow. And I think today with these folks and the efforts that we've taken together, the real thing for us is St. Louis has been called out as being the top 3, the top 5 in entrepreneurship and innovation. Is figuring out, it's kind of like having this beautiful puzzle and having all the pieces laid out, but you haven't started snapping the pieces together yet. And I think that's what we're trying to do, and what we need to do is start to put the pieces of the puzzle together so that the picture gets clearer and brighter for us and continues to make sure that we can remain competitive and relevant as a city that is a wonderful place for innovation and entrepreneurship.
I think I just want to make a point with this, what this evidence shows. This is extremely important. The work that ML did and what this Equity and Entrepreneurship Collective is doing is really setting the stage to understand how can these resource partners better support entrepreneurs. What type of programming that is lacking? What is it that we need to be doing? And y'all have to understand something. Kauffman put a lot of trust in saying, here's almost $500,000 worth of money. Y'all figure it out. Because literally, when we came around this table, we were all looking at each other going, okay, what do we do? Okay. Yeah, it's like, now we got it, what do we do with it? But I think it, in a year worth of time, time. That's a lot of work. If you're talking about trying to understand where people are, because my biggest frustration was if somebody is not being supported here, they leave St. Louis. That is a loss for tax base, that's jobs, that's income, that's a whole, it's not just, okay, they're gone.
Right.
That's an impact to our region, and we don't need that to occur. Ben talked about, I was invited to the White House, Obama White House. Let's be clear, to talk about what we're doing here in our region. We've been asked to sit on advisory boards in LA, in New Orleans, because of what we're doing here in this region. We are making great strides here. It's slow, but it's being made, and it's all for the benefit of entrepreneurs that are here. We want you guys to be supported, and we want you to build strong businesses.
So let's open it up to questions. This is now your time and opportunity to ask questions that you might have about any of these initiatives, or share your thoughts on what we've been working on, or suggestions. So anyone, feel free. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask? You've dumbfounded them.
Oh, come on.
Based upon your research, what are some of the gaps that you have? I see the big picture on the map that you have here, but some of the, maybe the next level gaps. Are there particular skills or educational gaps that our entrepreneurs are needing?
I'll say, in part informed by the data collected, in part informed by some of our STEM STL work, one of the gaps that continues to emerge, we say partly in the entrepreneur support community, but clearly partly more in the pipeline, is just that entrepreneurial mindset. And it's in our even elementary education, it's in our training programs, and it's even in the way we quote-unquote teach entrepreneurship, right? You guys know much better than I do as entrepreneurs. The business model canvas or the 10-week boot camp do your marketing plan is, that's the framework, but the juice of it, and really the most often telling part of a successful entrepreneur is that you can't put your finger on it thing, right? It's in that entrepreneurial mindset that is applicable. We're working on a National Science Foundation grant with Harris Stowe right now. It's all about entrepreneurial mindset training that leads to a pathway potentially of entrepreneurship, but is just as applicable in a job or a career or a research bench. And so I think as we continue to think of entrepreneur support and entrepreneur training, it's how do we not just talk about the nuts and bolts of the cap table and being able to navigate that. How do we cultivate a regional culture and an individual ethos of that entrepreneurial mindset?
There was a hand over behind the pole. I couldn't see it.
I came in late, so I'll apologize if this was covered and you can blow my question off. In addition to determining numbers of people of color who were entrepreneurs, did you use the data you collected to look at the age distribution, the gender distribution, and so on?
Very much so, yeah. And so I shorthanded the question about how many black entrepreneurs, but it was the same response. For we didn't know how many women entrepreneurs, we didn't know age, we didn't exactly know from where in the region are entrepreneurs coming. Candidly, we didn't get clear answers on any of that. We got better answers than we've had. We all have better data, but we know that we didn't get statistically significant, I can never say that right, statistically significant data in much of any area to really be able to tease that out, but we know some better questions to ask next time. We came to realize that across 17 different entrepreneur organizations, we all define race differently, right? We all define gender differently in many cases. And so when you start to aggregate, try to understand the regional picture, the data doesn't always align, but we're getting closer so that we can have a better sense and help inform our programs of, where there is often, the nation's picture of an entrepreneur, particularly a successful entrepreneur, right, is Mark Zuckerberg. Right? Mark Zuckerberg is not a typical entrepreneur for thousands of reasons, but success aside, age many others. The typical age of an entrepreneur in St. Louis is significantly older than the 19-year-old college kid. And so what does that mean for the way that we coach entrepreneurs and teach entrepreneurs and where we find entrepreneurs? So we don't have real precise data at this point. We're working on how do we polish and present what we do have, not present it as the census or the answer, but as directional findings. But it's helping us get closer.
And just a little context for you, because you're probably thinking, you have 14 organizations, but you only have 100 and something respondents. This year was kind of the year, it's what we've defined as a 3-phase process, and this year what we did was we basically used the survey data that each organization had already from the past year that they did the survey, and then we took existing surveys, which were different surveys, and we tried to squish them together, which, as you would know, right, we don't ask the questions in the exact same way. So a lot of times we ask similar questions, but not in the same way, so we couldn't push the data together. So that was kind of part of the problem and why the numbers are so low and they're not statistically significant. Is just because we couldn't take all of those surveys and get them to fit together exactly. So that's part of our learning as far as what we're going to have to do to get to standardized survey questions. And to get, for some organizations, they absolutely cannot share the data, even if it's anonymized, with anyone outside of their organization. So there's some issues like that will have to be addressed. And ultimately, like the big end goal dream that we'd like to get to, which is, again, this 3-phase process, is to have one survey that goes out, and the entrepreneur that fills it out, one of the first questions they're asked is, what resource organizations from the region have you worked with? And they go through and they check all the boxes that apply, and it's a dynamic survey that then kind of builds in real time, and then they answer the questions, the core questions we need, and then any other particular questions those organizations might need for them as well. So then that entrepreneur isn't getting survey fatigue, where literally we have organizations, member organizations with I-10, they've been through Capital Innovators, they're getting surveyed. They get our survey. They work in T-Rex, they get that survey. They're an Arch Grants company, Cortex. So I mean, so some of these companies are literally, we know, can get as many as 4 or 5 surveys. So just a little bit of context on why, when we did it this year, we don't really have a data report to share, is because we weren't set up to do that this year. So.
Question on the bottom there first, and then come back to front.
I kind of have 2 questions. So where I've really struggled, and maybe I-10 helps with this, is that finding good team members to find, because you can only wear 14 hats for so long, and I'll do it because that's how we work, right? We just do it, but is there any sort of part of this that kind of like someone who's like a marketing student, or has been coached by marketing, that you could, is there anything like that? And then on the same kind of thing, so I'm developing a software, and I've worked with a couple of individual software programmers, then I dealt with a corporation, and the quality of code and the way that things were run, I mean, were completely poor quality. So is there a way to, is any of this addressed, like how to find those things?
One of the things that we want to do is, in the second step in our survey process, is to create a galaxy map that is similar to the resources that are available for entrepreneurial companies. It is a galaxy map that identifies technology, sources of technology talent, where people can be trained, programs, everything from launch code to what's up at UMSL, to the university programs, to the ad hoc efforts that are teaching. That's not going to address your specific concern about finding the quality talent you need to support your company, but it might be a starting point to help where you might go to start, because you'd be able to connect with 3 different sources of coding training and say, well, I need coders that have these skill sets or are vetted to this level. And that making it's a marketplace, right? It's an intellectual marketplace of talent. And the easier it is to work that bazaar, that marketplace, the more robust the community becomes. And it addresses very much the idea of how one of the hard things for people who have not been exposed to this is, how do I find my way in the front door, right? Where do I get my first training? And if I invest my hard-earned dollars or my limited resources in getting training, will the work be there on the other side? So that it focuses, and of course we see that coming out of the STEM programs in high schools and others. But back to your key point, we have to find a way of posting, and I know there have been efforts to post jobs and stuff, which yet to really get much traction that I'm aware of. But it's just building a core curriculum and a capability of resources that people can go to, like yourself, and say, I need a coder. Where do I go to find it?
So your 2 problems are very common problems for entrepreneurs. And from I-10's perspective, the way we address that is within our community. So one area is members of I-10 have access to our mentor community. So they go in, we have this cool tool called Mentor Match. You go in, you put in your keywords, it's kind of like a dating site, your areas of interest. I need help with product development. You're going to get the list of all the mentors that have product development expertise, okay? The other thing is we host a program called Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur, or Founder to Founder, F2F. And that program really just lets our entrepreneurs come together. It's an unstructured session, but they sit there and they talk about what issues they're faced with and what they're challenged with, and they help each other. And then the third part of that is basically once companies are a member of I-10's community, our platform has discussion groups. So if you have an immediate problem you're facing literally today, you could put it out on a discussion group. And that discussion group is read by both our mentors and all the other entrepreneurs in our community. And that's one thing about our community is it's a community of people who really love to help each other. So you'll post something out there and say, I need to get somebody with marketing expertise on my team. Does anybody know anybody? And then they'll pile on. So those are the kind of the 3 real-time things that we do to help address the problem that you're having, which is a very common problem. If that makes you feel any better. You're not alone.
Have you thought about checking out WashU or SLU for?
Well, actually, I was wondering if that would be an interesting
so
kind
very
of
good
connect,
point.
like,
So-
like
There was
relationship.
one session. I'm sorry.
Yes.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
There was one session here, it was by WashU students today. It's called Bear Studios. So
Yep.
it's basically run by students and
Yep.
also by a faculty member.
Yep.
What's
And
it called again?
Bear Studios, they're actually WashU students. And they are kind of a marketing they, I guess, are intermediaries between students who you may need who intern for you through your business. And it works 2 ways. They get experience
Right.
that companies want, when they graduate or have you.
Yep.
And you get their expertise.
You're saying bear, right?
It's called Bear Studios.
What's your mascot?
Yeah, the bear, animal bear.
I just
Yeah,
make
that's
sure-
our mascot.
This whole Bayer, like, I'm like,
You were thinking of.
If you look up the
Monsanto and Bayer.
If you look up the venture capital calendar,
I must have missed that one.
the issue, or it was on October 25th.
I was slacking that night. Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
So that's another, like Scandalaris does internship programs, and when those come up in the year, because it's kind of, that happens to be like school calendar year, then we push that out to our community and we notify you that, there's interns available through Scandalaris. There's a question up here.
Yeah. I've got 3 observations and a question for Jim.
Okay.
As rated for Forbes magazine, you're the #2 startup city in the nation.
Today.
I saw that about 2 weeks ago. As far as jobs, we're the #2 for jobs in the nation. We're right behind Pittsburgh. And then 3, I read in the journal that there are going to be 10,000 jobs just be Cortex area for IT, for STEM-related jobs. And then my question for Jim is, with your technology workforce and skills study, have you partnered with the universities around here for part of your study?
The answer is, when we conceived of doing the study, I went to the universities and asked them if the information would be interesting, and they said absolutely. We've been back to St. Louis U, we've been to Wash U, and we continue to run the circuit around to get this information to the universities, and Webster also. They're saying this information is newsworthy to us and useful because nobody has predicted it, nobody's generated this data with a level of detail, and it helps us build our curriculum specifically, and it also helps us explain to students why they need to take the curriculum we're suggesting.
Exactly.
So
I mean, so when they go out in the workforce, they're already prepared for that need.
Yes, yeah, it really builds confidence in the market process for curriculum.
I hate to do this, but very strict on time, and our next group is standing in the wings, ready to go. I have 3 things. Thank you all for all you do, and thank you guys for being here today. In the back of the room are our impact reports with the Workforce Tech Talent Study tucked inside. If we run out, they're downloadable from our website, i10stl.org. And then I want to ask you guys something. Please, when you go out of the room, because this will be a continuation of what we've been working on, workforce and talent. When you go out of the room, to the right, there's 3 big Post-it sheets hanging up with questions, and there's pens on the ledge there about tech jobs, finding jobs, sourcing talent, and tech training. So we're going to start compiling information to build this galaxy map, and if you can help us do that, we would love it. So if you don't mind, just kind of swing out the door and to the right, and then the panel will be outside if you have any other questions you'd like to ask us. Thank you all.